Okay, everyone. So let's go on to the suttas again. If you have any questions later on about the death contemplation, we can maybe take those later on or tomorrow, which is the last day, and see what happens. So I'm going to continue now with the suttas, and the sutta that I mentioned yesterday very briefly is the Soil Remover Sutta, and this is a sutta which kind of gives an overview.
You're back, Ajahn.
Yeah,
We're getting used to it by now.
Yeah. So one of these lifetimes we will get this sorted out. So I'm not sure about this lifetime, but okay. So we are looking at the gradual purification of the mind, how it is done gradually, and I'll just read out the beginning of the sutta, and then I'll discuss it in not too much detail, because as always we are running short of time. This is true for every retreat I do. There's never enough time to discuss everything in enough detail, but maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, maybe sometimes there's too much detail, so it doesn't really matter. It's just different retreats focus. So the sutta says there are gross defilements of gold, soil, grit, and gravel. Now the soil remover or their apprentice first pours the gold into a trough and washes, rinses, and cleans it. When that has been removed and eliminated, there still remain middle-sized defilements in the gold, fine grit and coarse sand. The soil remover or his apprentice washes, rinses, and cleans it again. When that has been removed and eliminated, there still remain subtle defilements in the gold, fine sand and black dust. So the soul remover or his apprentice washes, rinses, and cleans it again. When that has been removed and eliminated, only grains of gold remain. The goldsmith or his apprentice now pours the gold into a melting pot and fans it, melts it, and smelts it. But even when this has been done, the gold is not yet settled and the dross has not yet been entirely removed. The gold is not yet malleable, wieldy, and luminous, but still brittle and not properly fit for work. But as the goldsmith or his apprentice continues to fan, melt, and smelt the gold, a time comes when the gold is settled and the dross has been entirely removed, so that the gold becomes malleable, wieldy, and luminous, pliant, and properly fit for work. Then whatever kind of ornament the goldsmith wishes to make from it, whether a bracelet, earrings, a necklace, or a golden garland, he can achieve his purpose. So here we have the purification of gold, yeah? And it's kind of fascinating that it is about gold. You will see in a second that gold here stands in the simile, it stands for the mind. So the mind is like gold. And that, of course, is already very interesting, because gold is obviously one of the precious substances that we have in humanity. And it's interesting, wherever you go in the world, there's always gold that is considered one of the most precious substances. Yeah, it doesn't really matter what human culture you go to. It's like that pretty much everywhere. Yeah? And so gold has this very special sense of wealth, and it is related to beauty and adornments and all of those kind of things. Yeah, so it's something very special. So the mind is compared to one of the most special substances that we can have as human beings externally. And that, of course, is very important. Yeah, the idea that the mind is something very, very precious, something very special. In fact, it is far, far more precious than gold, because the happiness that you can get from gold, yeah, let's face it, it's pretty limited. Yeah, even though you can adorn yourself with a bit of gold, it doesn't make that much difference to your life, really. It's kind of very external. But the happiness and the beauty you can get from a refined mind is very, very powerful. And of course, this is what this is about, is this marvelous, amazing ability of the mind to give us happiness. But for the mind to be able to give us that happiness and to give us something very special, we have to refine it in exactly the same way as we refine gold. We have to refine the mind. When gold is unrefined, when it's full of gravel and dust and particles and all these kind of things, it doesn't shine. It doesn't have any luster. It's not really beautiful at all. We need to remove all of that, all of those defilements for gold to become beautiful. And then gold becomes really shining here. And in the same way with the mind, if the mind is full of defilements and problems, it is dull. There's nothing really beautiful there. It doesn't really feel happy or anything like that. So we need to work on those defilements of the mind, gradually remove them. And as we do that, gradually the luminosity and the beauty of the mind starts to shine forth. It's a process. And you would probably have seen some of that already, how sometimes the mind can be defiled and it's really kind of very ordinary and uninteresting in many ways. And at other times you will have seen that your mind is actually very bright and luminous and powerful. And there's something very special about the mind. And you realize at that point the capacity for the mind to give you a sense of meaning and purpose and happiness and joy and actually everything you ever wanted in life. So the mind has the possibility of giving you everything, and so it's compared to gold. But of course, it is far, far more important than gold. But we have to go through the same kind of process of purification that you have to go through with gold to make it special. So what is this process of purification? And you will notice here that the process for gold is that you start with the coarse problems, with the coarse defilements, then you go to the medium defilements, then you go to the refined defilements, and towards the very end, it's a very small, tiny, minute defilements that you have to get out. So there is a particular sequence. You cannot really start with the small, tiny stuff. You have to start with the core stuff. Otherwise, it's not going to work. The process doesn't really work. So this is the right way of dealing with gold. And it's exactly the same again with the mind. We have to know the sequence. And this is a very important principle in Buddhism, that if you start out with very coarse defilements and problems in the mind, and then you go straight into a meditation retreat, and you start to sit for many, many hours a day, and you kind of just, and sometimes those kind of people, they go crazy. That's when you go crazy, because you have so many problems inside, and then you try to control them, or you force them kind of through meditation practice, and that is where it can lead to really, serious mental issues. So we need to know the process, and when we get the process right, when we know ourselves well, one of the critical things on this path is for each one of us to know ourselves well, know what your problems are, know where you are on this path. What is your ability to keep virtue in daily life? What is your ability to think the right kind of thoughts of kindness and care and these kind of things? And then as you know yourself, you know where you have to deal with things, what it is that you have to do on the path. And it's so important to be realistic about these things. Otherwise, we're just going to mess up the whole practice. So what does the Buddha say about this? This is what he says next. So then the goldsmith achieves his purpose. You make all this kind of jewelry or whatever. And in the same way, so too, when a bhikkhu, a bhikkhuni, an upasaka, an upasika is devoted to their mind, there are in them gross defilements, bodily, verbal, and mental misconduct. The earnest, capable person abandons, dispels, terminates, and obliterates them. So first of all, you are devoted to the higher mind, the adhicitta, and the higher mind is like samadhi. So we are moving towards samadhi. This word adhicitta is found in a number of places in the suttas. And the reason we are devoted to that is because that is the purified mind. Yeah, that's what we're trying to get. We're trying to move towards that. So the first thing that we do is then to remove the coarse defilements of the mind that have to do with bodily, verbal, and also mental misconduct. Yeah, so these are like breaking the precepts, yeah, or speaking harshly to people. And you can probably maybe summarize this as the 10 courses of unwholesome action that you may have heard about, the kind of a nice summary of the kind of virtue. Yeah, if you want to practice virtue to a high level, then those 10 ways or 10 courses are a good way of looking at it. Yeah. So you start with this. You ask yourself, is there anything I can improve in my bodily actions, my speech, and also in terms of very coarse mental conduct, like getting very angry, yeah, or having ridiculously desires and these kind of things. That is where we begin. This is the kind of the starting point. Yeah, we should never skip these kind of starting points. And only when that is reasonably established do we then move on to the next step. So the next step is when this has been done, yeah, at least reasonably well, maybe not completely. It's not as if you can complete one step fully. They kind of merge into each other, yeah, because there is no absolute barriers here, obviously. Yeah? So you have to kind of figure this out for yourself. When this has been done, there remain in them middling defilements, sensual thoughts, yeah, or thoughts about, or sensory thoughts perhaps, angry thoughts, and harsh thoughts. Yeah, so the angry and capable person abandons those, dispels them, terminates them, and obliterates them. So here we have still kind of, now we are talking about middling defilements. So these are like the way you tend to think about life. Sometimes you get angry with people and upset with them because they are harming you. They're doing bad things to me. And when people do bad things towards me, then I have the right to be upset. Yeah, it's like, this is me and this is my life and you are intruding on my life. Go away. And you get upset and angry because of that. There's a lot of anger comes because of the sense that we are attacked. Yeah, it's a very self-centered way of thinking about things. And this is a very big part of the problem there. So we start to change our attitude towards these things. We start to realize that actually it hasn't got anything to do with me. It has to do with the other person. They are the ones who have a problem. Yeah, we don't have to take these things personally. It's only when we take things personally that we tend to get angry. If the same thing happened to another person, we might just shrug our shoulders and we wouldn't be so concerned. But because it's happening to us, that's when anger is triggered so easily. So we overcome these things by skillful thinking, wise ways of reflecting. I mentioned before the power of reflection. And at this stage, before we get to meditation practice, the power of reflection is very, very powerful to overcome these things. It is not that hard to overcome anger. Yeah, maybe not all anger, but at least the majority of anger is relatively easy to overcome if you apply yourself in the right way. Sensual thoughts, yeah, excessive greed about things, excessive desires. And again, this can be overcome by some of the similes I mentioned before, the dangers in the sensory world and all of this. Yeah, again, using your mind in the right way, reflecting about the world in the right way, understanding the limits, all of these kind of things. And then you have the harsh thoughts, yeah, the non-compassionate thoughts, where you don't really care if other people suffer or not. And obviously that too is going to be very problematic. So you learn to understand other people's suffering. You put yourself in their shoes. You have a degree of empathy with others. You know that the way you feel is the way they feel. Yeah. So how can you, if you want to be treated in one way, how can you treat other people differently? It doesn't make any sense. If you want to be treated with kindness, and I think we all want to be treated with kindness, we want other people to treat us well, we should do the same thing in back to other people. That is the only reasonable way of thinking about the world. It is like the golden rule, yeah. this rule that you hear about also in Christianity, that you should treat others as you would like others to treat you. And interestingly, this golden rule is also found in Buddhism. In fact, seems to be found pretty much in all world religions, which is kind of fascinating. I guess it is a very obvious way of thinking about life. Yeah, so it is there. So you overcome these negative ways, these wrong ways of thinking, the middling defilements of the mind. Yeah, you gradually abandon that, and you become a more even person. You don't get kind of rocked around by all this, by the kind of vicissitudes of life. Yeah, and now angry, now desiring, and your mind is kind of up and down like this kind of yo-yo. But instead, you have more of an evenness, and you have more mindfulness in your daily life. It's like you walk around, you're more awake, you realize what is happening in your life to a much greater extent. And because of that, you have more ability to also react in the right way. There's a balance in your life. And when this starts to happen, of course, it is very, very nice and very beautiful as you develop in this way. And then you keep on, and then the Buddha says, actually, what is interesting here, I should also mention, is this refrain that you see there every time he talks about giving up these things. He talks about abandoning, dispelling, terminating, and obliterating. These are very strong words, especially obliterating or even terminating. I don't know if there was a movie called Terminator. I don't know if you've heard about that movie. I think it was even before I ordained, the first Terminator movies were kind of out already. It goes a long way back. This was this kind of killing machine or something like that. Terminate is like kind of very violent ideas and how to or whatever. So termination, it has this kind of violence built into it. And obliteration also, it sounds like you're taking a sledgehammer and kind of pulverizing something, something like that. It has a very kind of lot of force kind of related to these ideas. So, which is very interesting. So why does the Buddha use these particular words? And what is fascinating is that to be able to understand what these words actually mean, it sounds like you have to use force and willpower, but actually when you look at the context in this sutta, and especially other suttas, when the same words are used, it actually turns out that what it really means is using wisdom, reflecting in the right way. That is actually more what it means than using willpower. It is more related to using wisdom than to use the will. So that is kind of interesting, because it sounds like it's about the will, but actually it is not. So it shows you how careful sometimes you have to be when you read the suttas. Even the best translators, sometimes it's hard to bring out the meaning of the original, and especially when you need to read many suttas to understand what is going on. And you may wonder, why is it that wisdom is used to obliterate things? And the answer is actually quite simple when you think about it. If you try to obliterate bad thinking by using willpower, what very often happens is that the willpower, it kind of pushes the thoughts away, it forces them out of your mind, like very many people do ordinarily in ordinary life. If there's a thought we don't like, we kind of push it out, we blot it out. We don't want to see it because this is not the real me. I'm not really like that, and we don't want to see what is going on. But what happens if you do that? Two things happen. You use up all your energy, because it takes a lot of energy to force things out of your mind. And because you are just forcing it out, you haven't actually dealt with the underlying causes. So when your mind gets tired and you can't really sustain that suppression anymore, and you have to let go, then bang, it comes back again, because it's right there under the surface. You let go, and lo and behold, it is there waiting to take its revenge. Bang, it comes back. And sometimes it comes back even more powerful than it was before, because you haven't really eliminated the problem. All you have done is suppress it for a while. Sometimes suppression may work in certain cases, because maybe in the meantime something else grabs your attention, but sometimes it leads instead to this very problem of things blowing back up again, and often in a worse way. And also, suppression can also be mentally harmful if you do it a lot. It can lead to all sorts of mental problems, repressed anger, and all of these kind of things that psychologically are known to lead to a destabilized mind. So it is actually much better to use wisdom power, because when you use wisdom power, what you're doing, you're dealing with the root of the problem. You're changing your perspective. You're looking at the situation in a new way. Instead of seeing the person as someone nasty and bad, you have compassion on them instead, because you know that they have qualities that actually lead to their own dukkha and suffering in the long run. And by changing your perception, changing the way you look at the person, the problem goes like that, completely gone in a flash like that, if you get it right. But to get it right, you have to learn how to use these reflections. You have to do it again and again, yeah? And then you will be able to do these things where you can abandon these negative thoughts really, really fast, because you can see the problem arising. And then when you see the problem arising, you use the antidote and it's gone. And when it's gone in that way, it stays gone for a long time. So using wisdom has two great benefits. It doesn't take that much energy. Yeah, all you have to do is shift your perception. And when you use it, it abandons the problem in a much more profound way rather than just holding it back. The downside of using wisdom is that it takes more training. It takes more practice. You have to reflect more. You have to learn how to do these things in the right way. That is perhaps the problem with wisdom. Yeah, but once you get used to these ideas, it becomes a very useful and powerful tool in your practice. So I'm just pointing that out so we kind of don't get these things wrong, because it's important to understand what is going on here. Then the Buddha carries on and he says, when this has been done, there remain in them subtle defilements, thought about their relation, thoughts about their country, thoughts about their reputation. An earnest, capable person abandons, dispels, terminates, and obliterates those thoughts. Yeah? So here we have thoughts that have to do with your identity. This is very much to do with your sense of self. And, sometimes in meditation, when you start to become a little bit peaceful, the sense of self wants to kind of, wants to continue to exist. You don't want to give up that sense of self. Oh, I belong to, this is who I am and this is what I am. And then it kind of reasserts itself because it doesn't want to disappear, because there's a great sense of disappearance in meditation practice. So the sense of self can come up, yeah? So we disidentify a little bit. We don't think of ourselves as, having these kind of identity traits. We realize this is all pretty superficial, yeah? Instead, we build up the good qualities inside. And this is one of the nice things about practicing the Dhamma. After a while, instead of identifying with all of these external things, you identify with something inside of yourself, yeah? Something kind of radiant and beautiful and happy inside of yourself, your mind that you have developed. You identify with that. And the beautiful thing about that is that it doesn't really have any much identity. Yeah, it doesn't really have a gender. You become like a genderless person, doesn't have a nationality, doesn't have an education, doesn't have a socioeconomic status, doesn't have a skin color, doesn't have anything. You become this disembodied. And in a sense, it makes us all more equal when we practice in that way. Yeah, we're all kind of one in a sense at that particular point, because we have abandoned all of these external things that distinguish us from each other and that don't really matter very much at all. And we build up this beauty inside instead. And that is what we identify with. And the reason why we identify with that is because it is more powerful identity, it's a more beautiful identity here. Everyone wants to identify with things that are more happy, yeah? And this happens naturally as you practice on this path. So you give up your identity. You realize it is superficial. You realize, actually, I'm not interested in having a particular nationality, yeah? And it's kind of strange. I have now lived in Australia for over 25 years. And I've now got an Australian passport. I also have a Norwegian passport as well, both Norwegian and Australian. And sometimes I ask myself, who am I? Am I Norwegian? Am I Australian? And the answer is I'm probably neither all that Australian, perhaps not all that Norwegian any longer. I don't know. It's very hard to tell. I don't feel particularly anything at all. And that feeling of not being anything in particular it's kind of nice. Yeah, it's kind of liberating. You don't feel trapped by a particular culture, a particular way of thinking, or anything like that. And you can kind of float more easily, you know, around the world. You can see all people as people, and you can identify with everyone in a certain way. And that is a very, I don't know, I think that's a very positive thing to do. It leads to less problems in the world, conflicts and all of these kind of things. So reduction in identity, I think, is a marvelous thing here. And I think we should do more of that in this world, because it leads to more harmony, more peace, and all of these kind of things, as well as deeper meditation. So you abandon all of these things. And then when this has been done, there remain only thoughts connected with the Dhamma. Yeah, or you could translate that as, when this has been done, there remain only thoughts that accord with the Dhamma, that are in accord with the Dhamma. In other words, thoughts of kindness, yeah, thoughts of goodwill and these kind of things. I think either one of those translations are possible, but I think that accord with the Dhamma is better, because connected with the Dhamma doesn't say so much about the quality of the thought, but the according with the Dhamma says something about the quality. Now, the quality of the mind is very high at this point. You have abandoned so many defilements already, yeah? There's only the nice, very simple thoughts remaining in your mind. The beautiful ideas, may all beings be happy and well. Not even thoughts, perhaps, but like perceptions or images of goodwill and all of these kind of things is what is left. But that too has to go. Yeah, when we go into a samadhi, all of these things have to go. But now you're getting very close to where you want to get. Yeah, now it is very easy. You have done all the hard work, and the last remnant of the journey is relatively easy. So because there are these thoughts left, that stillness that you have at this point, that samadhi, is not yet peaceful and sublime. Not yet, you haven't yet achieved the full tranquility. I think that is a better translation there. You haven't achieved the full tranquility yet, not attained the full unification. But the samadhi is still reined in and checked by active suppression of the defilements. Yeah, Sankara Nigaya Varitavara, or something like that is the Pali there. So what that means is that because the mind is still active to some extent, yeah, it says there in the translation, it says forceful, but I think that is too strong a word. It just means the mind is still active. It hasn't still reached the full stillness of the mind, the full tranquility. There's a little bit of activity there, yeah, seeing things, maybe checking the mind a little bit, and then if the mind goes in the wrong direction, you bring it very gently back again. These very simple things that are still going on at this particular point. This is what this means. If you see a hindrance arising, then you move your mind in a different direction. Yeah, this is what is happening, because before you reach samadhi, the hindrances are just under the surface, waiting to come back at any time. So because the mind is still like this, because you are still a bit of activity there, you want to go beyond this as well. So the Buddha says, but there comes a time when the mind becomes internally steady, composed, unified, and stilled. That stillness is peaceful and sublime. You have gained the full tranquility and attained to unification. It is not reined in and checked by active suppressing of the defilements. Yeah, so gradually, now at this point, we are doing meditation practice, yeah, and gradually, as you're doing meditation, there comes a time when the samadhi is achieved. And that's an interesting way of talking about it, yeah, there comes a time. It doesn't say you make it happen. It doesn't say you focus on the breath and then it happens. It says there comes a time. It's a passive way of talking about meditation practice. And I think that is no accident. Yeah, this kind of way of talking is actually intentional. The idea is that you just have to wait. You have to sit back and you have to allow the process to happen. Yeah. If you see a defilement rising, you gently perhaps nudge the mind in the right direction. But the main purpose, the main job you have at this particular point is to stand back, sit back and just be aware, not being involved in actually what is going on, allowing the nimitta or the beautiful breath or whatever it is to develop in their own way. So little things like that can be very meaningful. There comes a time, in other words, you wait patiently. You don't know when it's going to happen. You're not excited about what's going to happen next. You don't think about a past experience that was beautiful, because the moment you think about it, you're going to destroy the meditation. Instead, you say to yourself, I have no idea if it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and that's perfectly okay. I'm going to enjoy what is here. I'm going to be content and happy and do absolutely nothing else than to enjoy. And if this is all that happens, I'm happy with that. This is the right way of meditating. Never look for a result. If you look for the result, then the meditation will be destroyed. It may indeed be that the result you had in the past, you may never have it again. It may have been a special kind of meditation that you may never actually reappear. Maybe you will go somewhere else next time. So the whole idea of looking for what we had in the past is very misguided, because there are so many different kinds of states and stages you may have at this particular point, that to look for results is always going to be very problematic. So let it go. See what happens next. Maybe something completely different is going to happen, and that's fine. Allow that to happen instead. There comes a time, and then the mind achieves all of these things. And what it achieves is this internally steadiness, the composedness, the unification and stillness of the mind. And this is all pointing towards the jhana states. And at this point, you have achieved that jhana. These are standard words used for the jhanas elsewhere in the suttas. That's why I'm here. I'm here to tell you these things, because you really have to know your suttas quite well to know this. But that is what it means. So then you have achieved that. And then what happens next? Then it says that there being a suitable basis, you are capable of realizing anything you like to realize by direct knowledge, wherever you might incline your mind. There being a suitable basis. And it's a bit funny. The meaning of this is really that wherever there is a possibility of realizing something, whatever can be realized, now you have the opportunity to realize those things. That is what it means. So once you achieve a jhana, the world is open to you. You can do things that you never realized were doable, perhaps, because these states are so powerful. See things and turn your worldview upside down and see things that are so astonishing that it kind of blows your mind out, both metaphorically and also ultimately literally. Blows your mind out literally. That's pretty kind of amazing here. So this is where all of that is heading here. So that is in brief, the gradual path. And the main reason I'm pointing this out is to just make it clear that we have to do things in the right order. And if we do things in the right order, in the right way, if we know ourselves well, we know what we need to do, then this is what we can expect to happen gradually, gradually, gradually over time. So then let's come back to the analysis of the path again. I'm going to now look a little bit more detail on the next path factors. So now that we know that we have to do things gradually, we have to start out with the coarser path factors. So we already have seen right view, then right intention or right aim or purpose, whatever you want to call it. And from that comes right speech. And after right speech comes right action, samma kammanta, and then right livelihood. And these three are very closely related to each other. It's very hard to really discern any particular sequence. There are other places in the suttas where the sequence is slightly altered, where the right action comes first, then right speech. I don't think there is any clear sequence in these things. Maybe an argument can be made for a sequence, and I've tried to do so before, but I think it's probably more useful to think of this as not really being all that sequential. It's just a morality, yeah? So what is this morality? I'm going to go through this fairly briefly because I'm assuming you know a lot of this already. Yeah. So what is right speech? It is abstinence from false speech, yeah, or from abstinence from lying, abstinence from divisive speech, abstinence from harsh speech, and abstinence from idle chatter. This is called right speech. Yeah? So lying is the worst one. It comes first. Divisive speech is the second worst one, is when we divide people from each other by talking other people down or being excessively critical and all of these kind of things. Yeah, that is actually quite bad according to this. Third one is harsh speech, when we don't talk gently, but we talk harshly for people. And the last one is idle chatter. So remember, there is a sequence here. Everything in the suttas is sequential. The sequence always matters. The first one is the most important one. The last one is the least important one. That is right speech for you. And please try to understand these things in the right way. Sometimes people become kind of obsessive with this kind of virtue, and it's good to be obsessed in a certain way, but not in another way. It's important to take it really seriously, the idea of not lying, for example. Yeah, you take that really seriously, and that is a kind of, I guess, being obsessed in the right way, taking it seriously, knowing that this really matters. But at the same time, it's also important to understand that lying has a large variety to it. Certain types of lying are far worse than other types of lying. And it is the bad types of lying that we really should be concerned about. Yeah, when we lie because we want to gain something, when we lie because we want to hide something, when we lie because we're upset with somebody, this kind of stuff is bad. But say that you lie because someone isn't ready for the truth. Yeah, you have compassion for somebody and they say, "Oh, have I got cancer?" Yeah, and you don't know what to say, and quickly you say, "Oh no, you'll be fine." Yeah, because you realize it's the wrong time to tell the person. Yeah, in that kind of situation, lying is far, far less bad than it is in the other situations, because you're coming from compassion instead of deliberately trying to mislead the person. Sometimes people go to extremes and they say you cannot tell jokes, yeah, because when you tell a joke, then you are lying. Yeah, the Englishman, the Scotsman, and the Irishman, or like we say in the Scandinavian countries, is we have the Dane, the Swede, and the Norwegian, yeah, and these kind of jokes. That's not really lying. That's about making someone laugh, having a good time. You're not really trying to deceive them. You're trying to make their life better. Yeah, it's almost the exact opposite. So we need to be sensible about these things. You need to know what really is bad and what is not so bad. So if occasionally you have to tell a white lie because of compassion and you are afraid of hurting someone badly, don't be too concerned about that occasionally. If you can avoid that too, it's probably even better. Yeah, if you can avoid it, but it's not going to block you from meditation or anything like that. It's the coarse aspects of this that matter. The same thing goes with the other aspects of right speech, like divisive speech, for example. Yeah, divisive speech is if you kind of say bad things about somebody in the presence of someone else just because you are upset with them or they have hurt you, whatever. That is always bad. But it doesn't mean that in all circumstances it is wrong to say something bad about somebody. There are circumstances where that is appropriate. For example, if someone is taking advantage of somebody, if someone is a bandit, yeah, or someone is is known for assaulting people or whatever, of course you have to warn people and you have to say things as they actually are. But you don't exaggerate, you don't do things, you state things as they are without making it worse. But sometimes we have to say the negative things about other people. That is true also in spiritual circles. Yeah, sometimes we find that there are teachers who are unscrupulous and do bad things, and then we have to be honest about things. The idea of hiding people's qualities because you are afraid of the guru or whatever, that is really bad, and it's very destructive. We should not be afraid of telling the truth when we think that there is a real problem. Otherwise, we're just making vulnerable people vulnerable to be taken advantage of. And that is terrible, and it should not really happen in real spiritual circles. So we need to be honest about things, and also about things like wrong views that are out there. Sometimes we have to call out those wrong views. Yeah, people say that you don't need to be moral on the Buddhist path. Yeah, actually, that's wrong view. You have to be moral to have success on the Buddhist path, and all of these kind of things that happen in the world. So again, it is right time and right place, being sensitive about these things, knowing what is really bad. When are you, ultimately it is about when you are motivated and driven by defilements. If you are driven by defilements, then it is bad. If you are driven in your actions by compassion and care, it is not going to be bad what you're doing. It's even going to be good. Even if it looks like a breach of the precepts, it is not if you're coming from true. It has to be true, though, if you're coming from true compassion and kindness. Harsh speech, the opposite of harsh speech is a gentle speech, the speech that goes to the heart, yeah, that many people want to hear, and all of these kind of things, yeah. And lastly, the idle chatter. And again, it is the fourth one, and I recognize that especially in lay life, some degree of idle chatter is probably required. Otherwise, people think you are completely nuts. You become a religious nut, yeah. I thought you Buddhists were sensible, but you are just as, you are really, you don't know what is all this talking about impermanence all the time? We can't talk about something ordinary for once. We want to hear ordinary talk. Yeah, I want to talk about politics or talk about celebrities or whatever. So maybe you go along for a few minutes, and then you kind of skillfully maybe divert the discussion or whatever it is that you do. But you don't have to be too kind of a dry Buddhist, yeah, who nobody else can talk to because they are so utterly boring and focused only on these kind of spiritual matters that are incomprehensible to outsiders. Yeah, oh yeah, it's all suffering. What do you mean it's all suffering? And then, otherwise you lose all your friends, yeah, and then it gets even, yeah, you have to suffer because of that. So find a good balance with these things. Be smart about it, be wise about it, don't overdo it, don't make sure that you are, people still listen to you, you still have your friends and all of those kind of things. And, it's one of the great things about being a Buddhist and being a Buddhist monk as well, or being a Buddhist nun as well, is that you have a lot of influence on people in the world. Yeah, I have noticed that in my own life, how much you can benefit other people, especially people who are close to you, like your family and even friends. It is remarkable how much how much this matters, that you have this spiritual outlook, and people often listen to that. So don't waste that opportunity sometimes by being too kind of austere and dry in the way you deal with the world. So that is the right speech. Then we have the right action, yeah, abstinence from the destruction of life, abstinence from stealing, abstinence from sexual misconduct. This is called right action. So fairly obvious what that means, yeah. And again, don't take it to an absolute extreme. Know that with these things too, there are kind of middle ways. For example, with destruction of life, we do our very, very best to avoid destruction of life. But sometimes it is almost impossible to avoid. Sometimes the local shire will come to your monastery or and say that either you get rid of those termites, or we're going to shut down the buildings, yeah, or whatever. So occasionally you have almost like as if you have no choice to do these things. So you are reasonable about it. You do your very best to avoid, but sometimes it is almost unavoidable. So otherwise, sexual misconduct is an interesting one. Sexual misconduct is really, again, about taking advantage of other people in a bad way, yeah, abusing them, minors, people who already are in relationships, or if you are in a relationship, then then it can be very hurtful if you don't commit to your partner and these kind of things. So it's about not hurting people in the realm of sexuality. That's what this really is about. But apart from that, Buddhism is not very moralistic. Yeah, Buddhism doesn't have anything about whether you are gay or straight, or whether you have even one or many partners, and all of that doesn't really. Buddhism doesn't kind of get involved with those kind of things. It only says you should not hurt other people. That is the critical thing. Yeah. And there's something beautiful about that. Yeah, something beautiful about the idea that it's all about our intention, not hurting people. It's not about kind of moralistic rules that have nothing to do with whether we hurt people or not. People have their private lives. Let them have their private lives. Let them do what they want. None of our business to tell people what to do. But be kind in what you do. Yeah, it's such a reasonable teaching, the Buddhist teachings. It's such a powerful way of thinking about morality. Yeah, it is almost unheard in world religions to think about morality in this way. It's so persuasive and so beautiful. And this is one of the things I love about the Buddhist teachings, that the whole morality aspect is such a jewel in Buddhism compared to most other teachings around the world, yeah, of various kinds. Anyway, let's carry on. And then we have you abandon the wrong livelihood, yeah. The wrong mode of livelihood is livelihood where you take advantage of others, basically. That's what it is, yeah? So you have the typical things, you know, livelihood, you trade in meat, or you trade in poisons, or you trade in alcohol, or you trade in living beings, and that kind of stuff. You trade in weapons, yeah? So please don't be a weapon smuggler. Yeah, so if you are one of those weapon smugglers, I would recommend you to abandon weapon smuggling here. Are there many weapon smugglers on this retreat, Aya? You don't have to answer that question because it might be embarrassing for those who are weapon smugglers. But so if you are a weapon smuggler, then I would recommend you to change your livelihood. Yeah, and that would be very wise. But sometimes people actually do work in these industries. Yeah, and they may work in a bar, for example. And so these things certainly happen. And I have some kind of acquaintances who work in the weapons industry. Is kind of interesting. Norway has one of the per capita, one of the largest weapon industries in the world per capita. Yeah, Norway, that tiny little country, and we have all these weapons. And I know some of the people who work for some of these weapons manufacturers, and it's kind of, I sort of feel like telling them, are you sure this is a good idea to work for this kind of company? But sometimes you can't. Yeah, you don't have that kind of relationship that allows you to say these things. But you know, it's kind of yeah, it's not very nice when you know what happens around the world with these weapons. Anyway, it's all about right livelihood, and I'm not going to go into that anymore. And so let's have a quick look at and move on to the next sutta. This is called the Wise and Foolish People. This is from the middle-length sayings of the Buddha, number 128, the Bala Pandita Sutta. And it goes as follows. There are these three characteristics of a wise person, the signs of a wise person, the attributes of a wise person. What three? Here the wise person is one who thinks good thoughts, speaks good words, and does good deeds. If a wise person were not so, how would the wise know of him thus? This person is wiser. It is because he does these things that you know of him. It is a wise person. It's fascinating. Simply by observing someone's conduct, you tell whether they are wise or not. Do they speak kind, good words? Do they act in a good way? Think in a good way? That is already wisdom in action. Yeah. So if you are living like that, and I'm sure all of you are living like that to a fairly high degree, otherwise you wouldn't be here, you wouldn't torture yourself going through a retreat and all of that, yeah? So you are here precisely because you already live like this to a high extent. So congratulations, you are a wise person, yeah, already. You are leaning towards wisdom. It's quite nice, isn't it, to be considered a wise person? So you're already heading in the right direction. So it's marvelous, and it's wonderful to know that this is the word of the Buddha. He says this is how you know someone is wise. It's not the highest wisdom, it's not the pinnacle for sure, but you are already heading in the right direction. A wise man or a wise person feels pleasure and joy here and now in 3 ways. If a wise man is seated in an assembly or along a street or in a square, and people there are discussing certain matters, then if the wise man is one who abstains from all of these bad things, yeah, the 5 precepts is what you see here, then he thinks these people are discussing certain pertinent and relevant matters. Those things are not found in me, and I am not seen engaging in them. So when you hear wise people discuss morality, discuss about the 5 precepts, discuss about kindness, yeah, you know that you are practicing that way. Yeah, when you hear someone that you feel is wise speaking in this way, you think, yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm doing this. And straight away, you feel a connection. You feel that, you feel a sense of joy that you are aligning yourself with the wise people in the world, and you are practicing in that way. Yeah, this too is kind of nice. Yeah, it's marvelous when you feel praised by those people that you look up to. Yeah, so when Ajahn Brahm says, yeah, oh yeah, you're doing this is good, or you're doing well, or whatever, and or someone else does that who you really look up to, and you kind of think, wow, then you feel great, not because of an ego thing, but just because there's something about connecting to the wisdom of the world, which is really nice and uplifting. Yeah. And the last one, again, when a person is on his chair or on his bed or resting on the ground, and the good actions that he did in the past, his bodily good conduct, verbal and mental good conduct, cover him, overspread him, and envelop him. Just as the shadow of a great mountain peak in the evening covers, overspreads, and envelops the earth, so too when a wise person is on their chair or their bed or resting on the ground, and the good actions they did in the past, the good bodily, verbal, and mental conduct, cover him, overspread him, and envelop him. Yeah, it's this idea that we are covered and enveloped by our good actions. Yeah, our mind is filled by these things. Yeah, when you do lots of good, then that is what sits in your mind. That is what you even if you don't actively think about it, it's there at the back of your mind somewhere. You know that you are living well. It is there. Yeah. So when you come back home from a long day's work, and because you have lived well, then when you rest, all of those things come back to you, and you feel good about yourself. Yeah. You are enveloped by the goodness of your actions. You cannot help thinking about them because that's all you know, pretty much. Yeah. These good things, the way you live. And even if you're not perfect, those are the majorities that will be there. And it kind of permeates your mind. And it's impossible for you to get away from those good things. Yeah? Nice, isn't it? It's impossible to get away from that goodness. It's impossible not to feel some degree of happiness and joy because of those things. It's just so marvelous. And this beautiful simile of this house, yeah, which is the great mountain peak envelops the whole earth, yeah, in the same way the shadow of this mountain peak envelops all the ground, the people, the house in front of it, and there's nothing of that land which isn't overspread and enveloped by that mountain peak. In the same way, you are permeated, filled with these good actions, and you can't really get away from it. And in many ways, this is what is meant by the Sila Nusati. When we talk about the recollection of Sila, the remembering and recalling our good actions, this is sort of what it means. It doesn't mean a very powerful act of will. Oh yeah, what did I do again? Oh, I can't really remember. Did I do something good? Yeah, oh yeah, I did that. And you force yourself to remember these things. But it's more like almost automatic. Yeah, you just sit down and then you feel good about yourself. You can help the process a little bit on the way, yeah, especially if you have maybe a few unwholesome thoughts, and you just remind yourself of how you live or whatever. You help it a little bit, but a lot of the time it's almost automatic. You feel good about yourself because you are living well. It's just there, and you can't really avoid it. Then the wise man or the wise person thinks, I have not done what is bad. I have not done what is harsh. I have not done what is wicked. I have done what is good. I have done what is wholesome. I have made a shelter from anguish. When I pass away, I shall go to the destination of those who have done all of these good things. He does not sorrow, he does not grieve or lament, he does not weep, beating his breast and become distraught. This is the third kind of pleasure and joy that the wise person feels here and now. Yeah, so it takes away the fear of death at the same time, which is marvelous because the fear of death is one of those paralyzing things for many people. But if you are a truly good person, you don't really fear death anymore. It is like, it's almost as if you can feel that you will have a good destination in the future. Yeah, it's when you feel really wholesome inside. It's impossible to imagine how you can have a bad destination. You know your future is going to be good on the deep, deep level. And the more you develop the kindness, the more you develop the metta and all of these good qualities, the more it is impossible to feel fear in the face of death, because it cannot occur to you that it can have a bad result when you die. So that is the sutta on the benefits, if you like, of living well. Yeah. And can I go for another 5 minutes, Aya? Is that okay?
Of course, Ajahn.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So I'll go for another maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and because there is still quite a bit to be covered here. So then next one. Now we have gone through the right virtues, and now we're coming to right effort. Yeah, the samma padana or samma vayama, the sixth factor on the Noble Eightfold Path. And I will just briefly comment on what this is about. So now we're coming back to the analysis again in this particular sutta. And what is right effort? One generates desire for the non-arising of unarisen bad qualities. You make an effort, you arouse energy, you apply your mind and you strive. You generate desire for the abandoning of bad qualities that have already arisen. You generate desire for the arising of the good qualities, that have not arisen yet. And you generate desire for the maintenance of the arisen good qualities, for the non-decay, increase, expansion, and fulfillment by development. You make an effort, you arouse energy, you apply your mind, and you strive. This is called right effort. So these are very interesting, these 4 right efforts. And the first one there is about avoiding the arising of bad qualities that have not yet arisen. And what that means is like being on the outlook, during your day, being aware of what you are thinking, what you are saying, what you are doing, seeing what is going on, seeing the triggers for the negative actions, seeing the triggers for the negative thoughts, being aware of that. And because you have sufficient mindfulness on what you are doing, how you are living, you're then able to take an action that counters that negative tendency inside of you. You can see anger is about to arise, and then you quickly change your perception so anger has no chance to actually arise, like I've talked about before. So this is a very important part of it. This is often called sense restraint, but it is really, a lot of it is about using wisdom, using reflection to counter the bad qualities in your mind. Then it is about overcoming bad things that have already arisen. So if you have a bad thought, or something has arisen already, and then again you use the wisdom and your ability to think about the problems of this bad thought. There's a whole sutta on how to overcome bad arisen thoughts called the Vitakka Santana Sutta, the calming of the thinking mind. And you apply those things, reminding yourself of the danger in these things. And sometimes you can do that very quickly if you have trained yourself in this. And then you have the giving rise to those thoughts, that wholesome thoughts that have not yet arisen. And this can be, for example, in your meditation practice. You're meditating happily away, and then you realize, actually, I need to have some more joy in my meditation. Yeah, it's a bit dry. I'm happy to stay with the breath, but the moisture of joy, which really is attractive and which really sustains the meditation in the long run, that is missing. How can I give rise to that? How can I skillfully think in such a way, yeah, to bring this joy to mind by watching the breath in the right way, by having a sense of gratitude for all the people around me, for contemplating sila, reminding myself of my own good conduct very gently, yeah, and having a gratitude to the Buddha for having the world's most awesome spiritual teacher, yeah. The Buddha is kind of awesome, and that is what is so awesome about the Buddha, is that he is awesome. That is the most awesome thing about him. So, you know, you have these kind of attitudes, and you learn how to give rise to joy, and then finally, the maintenance of these qualities, the further development of them, yeah. Once the meditation is going well, the joy is arising, you keep on, you stay with the object, yeah. And this is especially about meditation practice. When you have the nimitta has arisen, or the breath is very beautiful, and you stay with it, yeah. You are passive, you're just observing, and you learn how to develop it further. You learn how to let go of past experiences, not trying to get them again, because otherwise all you're going to do is get frustrated, and things are never going to work out for you. And then you maintain it and you develop it. So these four are very interesting, yeah, and the way that they kind of come out in the suttas in different ways. One of those ways is according here to the next sutta, which is the sutta on removing resentment. And this is really about how to learn to overcome anger and ill will. And I usually teach this particular sutta on every retreat because I think it is very important. Yeah, it is about, very briefly, the sutta is about in people often have many qualities, both good and bad. So you learn to see the good qualities in people. Yeah, you recognize that looking at the bad qualities in people is not very useful, is not helpful for anyone. So you look to the good qualities instead, and you rejoice in those good qualities. Isn't it marvelous that this person has those good qualities? And you build those up. And then if a negative thought comes in your mind, you switch over, yeah, and you look at the good qualities instead of looking at the bad ones. And often that is quite easy to do. It is quite easy to do because a lot of the people that you are with are good people, yeah? People who keep the 8 precepts, people who live well, people who practice meditation practice. And if you remember that, instead of focusing on the small little faults, you shift your attention back to all those big qualities, and then the little niggly, small little things that you are being worried about, it just, poof, it is gone, and it's no longer a problem. This is one of the principles that you use here. Then there's the principle of when someone has all bad qualities. Yeah, if you cannot see any good qualities in somebody, then you have compassion for them because you know that they are moving towards so much suffering and problems in the future. Instead of focusing on yourself, thinking, oh, poor me, they are being bad towards me, you focus on the other person. You turn the table around and you actually have compassion for them because they are going to hurt far, far more than you are ever going to hurt because of the bad actions. It's a way of developing compassion. Those are the two main methods that come out in this sutta. I'm just telling you very briefly because I realize that I've taken out too much material on this retreat. I would really recommend you to read this sutta. It's very beautiful, and you can get a lot out of it by reading it yourself. And I have talked about this sutta elsewhere in much more detail, like a full hour at least for this particular sutta. So if you want to listen to that, you can. You will find it somewhere on the internet. Maybe there is even I probably did it when I was in Germany and did a retreat with you, Ayavimala, last time. I think I did that sutta. So there will be probably a recording somewhere. And if it's not there, it will be somewhere else.
Those recordings are on our website if anybody is interested, and as well as the handouts from that time.
Okay. Okay, marvelous. So I was going to move on to the questions now. What you said something yesterday about we could go longer with the questions today. Is that right?
Tomorrow. Today we have well, there's let me see. There's 4 people for interviews who have dropped out.
Okay.
And tomorrow we don't have interviews.
Okay. Okay. Good. So I won't go so long today, and tomorrow we can go a bit longer. Okay. Fine. Yeah. So let's do some questions for 15 minutes or so. So yeah, so here we are. I have them in front of me, so I am able to see them for myself. There's no problem. So, dear Ajahn, can one have a glimpse of past lives by entering into the jhanas? And the answer is absolutely. You can have a glimpse of your past life. Sometimes you can have more than a glimpse. Sometimes you can recall your past lives one after the other, yeah, moving from one life into the next one, coming into this existence. This is how it is described in the suttas, yeah, how you kind of move along, and you can see that whole process. And the more you see of the process, the more you know it is a true recollection of past lives. Yeah. Sometimes it can just be like a flash happening in your mind. If it's just a flash, there is a degree of uncertainty whether it is a real recollection or not. But if it's like a systematic thing which ends up in this life, yeah, you can see the whole process of causes and effects, and you know that it is, it is the real thing. So. Yes, so get into some good samadhi, yeah, and then remember your past life. It's going to be really powerful if you do that. So this is what the Buddha even recommends. Yeah, the 3 higher knowledges includes the remembering of past lives. It's going to be very, very, very powerful for coming to the very end of the path. Dear Ajahn, last night a bug crawled into my bedding when I was about to sleep. That's bad, isn't it? That's a bad bug. My reaction was immediate and physical: revulsion, at the adrenaline peak, elevated heart rate, etc. Intellectually, I knew the bug is not dangerous for me, and I didn't mean it harm. I just wanted to have it out of my vicinity immediately, based on that instinctive physical revulsion. How do you, as monks in a country infamous for poisonous critters, handle this? Would this require a deliberate physical exposure and desensitization, or contemplation of the nature of beings and accepting that the bug is in my bedding here? Asking for future reference. Thank you. So are you planning to come to Australia? Is that the reason? Are you worried about the Australian bush? The Australian bush is really dangerous, right? Super duper dangerous. We have all these snakes and we have all these spiders and all this kind of everywhere, kind of crawling around, waiting to jump onto you at any time. Actually, the truth is that the Australian bush is much more benign than you would think. Yeah, there's nothing really dangerous here at all. Yes, there is the odd spider that can bite you, but those spiders are far more afraid of you than you are of them. Yeah, and they are actually, once you get used to living with them, it's not a big deal. So I see these spiders all the time. They come to my kuti, they hang out, they're very shy, they're just trying to look after themselves like all creatures. And it's not like as if they are predatory and going after you and they want to eat you or anything like that. Yeah, you are too large for a spider to eat. So you are quite kind of safe from that one. So even in Australia, it's not a big problem. How often do I see snakes in the monastery here? Once a year, twice a year? Yeah, very rare to see snakes. So you don't really have to worry about that either. And apart from that, there is nothing really dangerous. Yeah, so there's nothing to worry about coming to Australia. It's perfectly safe to live in the bush, and don't have to worry about it. Depends a little bit on where you are, but certainly here in Perth, there is nothing to worry about. But I know what you mean. Yeah, when you kind of sometimes it happens to me as well. I'm kind of lying in my kuti, lying down, and suddenly a spider kind of drops off from the ceiling and into your face or something like that. And when you get your spider in your face, it's not, it is a little bit uncomfortable. But you just, you don't really need to react too much to it. Because you know that the more you react, the more likely the spider is going to do something back. So you don't do anything, you just leave it, you let it be. Maybe you turn on the light very gently, you try to see where the spider has gone, you get up very gently, and then you take it outside, and then you kind of leave it outside. That's what I would do in those situations. Yeah, even though I understand what you mean, that it can be a bit sort of uncomfortable to have a spider coming on your body like that. People react differently. The best thing to do is not to react too much. We had a case quite recently, one of the anagarikas here. We have some bees in the monastery, yeah, and bees can be quite scary. That's probably one of the more dangerous animals here, actually. But of course, bees, you have those in Europe as well. We have those everywhere. But we had a bee's nest, and we were kind of doing some work in the forest, and suddenly all these bees come out, yeah, coming after us. And that's also a bit uncomfortable. So this one anagarika started to wave his arms and trying to get these bees away. But the moment you start waving your arms and you become desperate, of course, that is when they sting you. That's when there is a problem. But if you are calm and relaxed and you don't move too much and you just allow the bees to do their thing, nothing happens. And it's always like that pretty much with animals. Animals bite because of fear. If you are at ease and you are relaxed, nothing really happens. That's what I recommend. Don't, try to go a bit against your instincts. Remember that there's more danger if you go after them and kill them, yeah, than if anything else. And then you can live in harmony with nature. You can live in harmony with the most poisonous of animals, and it's not really a big deal. Anyway, I know that this will vary from person to person, and it may not really satisfy you because maybe you are more fearful of these creatures. Anyway, that's what I do. Okay, dear Ajahn, in regard to filial piety, what is one's duty towards one's parents when being a monastic? Thank you, Ajahn. So filial piety is about looking after our parents. Yeah. So to what extent do we have an obligation to look after our parents? And I think that as monastics, we still have some degree of obligation. Yeah, we should not just kind of forget about our parents entirely. I think it's good to support them to some extent. But of course, there's a different kind of support that you can give as a monastic. Yeah, and there may even be times in your life when you cut off communication for longer periods because you are on retreat and all of that. And I think that is no problem at all. I think one of the main things is, as a monastic to our parents, is, ideally, what is really nice is to make them a bit more interested in Dhamma practice. This is one of the great things we can do as monastics. And one of the ways of doing that is not to push the Dhamma onto our family, but rather be kind, yeah, show our maturity in the Dhamma through our actions, and then things start to happen as a consequence of that. It's remarkable how it really goes to your family's heart, your parents' heart, if you as a monastic change and you kind of become a better person. When you visit them, you help out a little bit, you are certainly kind and you do all the right things. And it really makes an impact on parents, at least that is my experience. And that, I think, is the best way to get them interested in Dhamma. And that certainly happened in my case. It may not work in every family, but it certainly worked in my family. And, when I went back and visited my family, my father would ask me, this was my father, yeah, kind of astonishing. He would tell me, please, let us sit down, do some meditation together, and then you can give a talk to us afterwards. This is what my father said to me. And I was kind of, it's extraordinary when that happens, but it happened, I think, because, my family was already interested in spiritual matters to some extent. Yeah, even though my father was successful in worldly ways as well, he was also always interested in spiritual matters. So it was kind of came fairly naturally. Yeah? But it was I must admit, very gratifying and very nice when your family acts like that. And it felt like a great privilege to be able to teach my family these things. I would sit them all down and I would give them a talk on the importance of sila and kindness and these kind of things. And it's very sweet when that happens. The only person in my family I wasn't able to convert was my sister. She was the only one who was kind of holding out against the Dhamma. But even she, towards the end of her life, yeah, she was coming to Dhamma as well. So be kind, live in the right way. This is the most important thing. And then gradually you will open up their hearts. And then as you open up their heart, you will be able to throw in the pill of wisdom. Yeah, when they are laughing at your latest joke, you chuck in the pill of wisdom, and then they will become wiser as a consequence of your good conduct. So it's a bit different, yeah, but that I think is the best thing you can do as a monastic to your parents. Dear Ajahn, how to feel metta or even stay neutral towards people who have always had a very good life and have not experienced any pain or sickness all their lives? I have been very sick all my young life, down with cancer and other serious chronic health issues. And one of the relatives on my husband's side just screams, even if you take her blood pressure. She is old and is enjoying luxuries of life and had a very brief 5-minute day procedure recently, and hell broke loose. As a relative, in my capacity as a doctor, I went through a lot handling her whims and felt very resentful that my husband and family were so concerned over her, over virtually nothing, whereas I was dying with pain each and every day in the prime of my youth. Try as I might, I couldn't feel any metta towards her, though I am extremely empathetic person, and felt angry at such insane and vulgar discrimination. Other than observing our reactions, what else can be done to cultivate more metta? Yes, this is life for you. Your life sometimes is so unfair, right? Really, really unfair and unreasonable. And sometimes it just, blows your mind how these things are. So this is your training ground. When things are unfair, when things are difficult, it is your opportunity to learn compassion, empathy. Whenever there is a difficulty, there is a chance to overcome that and learn something from it. All of these things are opportunities for spiritual growth. If you think of a difficulty as an opportunity for spiritual growth, you're going to go a very, very long way on this path. So how do you deal with this particular situation? Well, if she is so concerned about such a small thing, she has a problem in her life. Yeah, she has a really big problem. And she obviously has no sense of perspective or no sense of proportion. She doesn't know what is going on. And you wonder what is going on inside her mind. There's something not quite right in her mind. She has some phobia or some problem in there. And once you focus on that side of it, that she is actually, she does have a problem, even though it may not be physical, she has a mental problem. And that mental problem is far, far worse than the physical problem that you have. Because the physical problem that you have, it will last maybe for a while, yeah? And then eventually we will all die. And then when you die, you will take those good qualities with you. You have those good qualities now anyway. And those good qualities you have in your mind are far more important for a happy life than the physical things in your life. The physical things are always secondary, and they're also much shorter lasting. The happiness inside and the positive qualities inside will help you in this life and also in future lives. So remember that she has a real problem. She doesn't really know what she is doing. Yeah, she doesn't have any real empathy, and it's very, obviously difficult for her. So that is one thing to remember. Another thing to remember is that very often how we experience the world is relative. Yeah, so if you are used to illness, maybe in your situation, and you are a doctor, but if you're used to illness, after a while, it's like becomes almost normal to be ill because you are used to it. But for someone who has a very good life and they're not used to any kind of illness, then a small hiccup can become a big problem because it is impermanence. Something is changing. Often impermanence is what is hard to deal with. Yeah. Once you get used to a situation, you can live like that, but impermanence is very difficult to deal with. So maybe for her, this is like a big shock or a big impermanence, yeah, and that is why it is hard for her to deal with these things. And in that sense, you can, maybe have a sense of, again, of compassion for her. She doesn't know how to deal with these little impermanences in life. So try to kind of get away from the idea of it being unfair. Life is unfair, yeah, unfortunately. That's the way it is. Remember that in the long run, you are the lucky one because you have the good internal qualities. She hasn't got that. That is what really matters. You are on the right side. She is on the wrong side. And in this way, hopefully, with time, with trying again and again, you can develop some compassion for her. Anyway, it's just an idea. You have to use your creativity here. Remember, we're all suffering. Yeah, we're all blind to some extent. We don't really know what we're doing. She too is blind. She is deluded. She doesn't know what is going on. Remind yourself of that. Yeah, and then as you do that, you can maybe have a bit more compassion for her. Dear Ajahn, how important is it to actually study the conceptual side of the Pali Canon and its interpretations? Is it really adding to the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, or doesn't it just lead the mind away to more intellectual pastures? It depends how you use these things. Yeah, one of the things that I try to do when I read the suttas is ask myself, what do they say to me about how I should live, how I should practice, how I should meditate, how I should think, how I should deal with other people? Yeah, what is the practical significance of the suttas? So it depends how you read them. So if you read them with that in mind, you're looking for help to understand how to practice, yeah, or you are looking at the suttas to be inspired. Sometimes the suttas have some very beautiful and inspiring passages that lift you up, yeah, make you joyous even, and give you all these positive things. Those are the two things you should look for in the suttas. Help to understand what to do and inspiration to practice the path, yeah? This is the Buddha speaking. Wow, he's talking to me. Yes, he's talking, but this is amazing. The Buddha is talking to me here. Wow, the greatest spiritual genius in the world is talking to me here. Cheapers. And it makes your hair stand on end because it is such a wonderful thing, yeah? And that then you're doing it in the right way. But if you're reading the suttas merely to have discussions or as an intellectual exercise or because you enjoy studying Pali grammar or something like that, then it is not helpful. Then it can perhaps even be a block, yeah? So this is the right way. But remember that sometimes the suttas may seem a bit dry, they may seem a bit intellectual, yeah? Things like dependent origination or some of the suttas that may not seem directly relevant to the path. But a lot of these things have to do with right view and right outlook, how we think about life. So even if it seems dry and intellectual, it may actually be that in the bigger picture of things, it does have an effect. It actually does matter, yeah, because it may not be immediately practical, but it actually helps you to understand the larger picture, and that will, down the track, have an effect on how you think about the world and what you do. So don't dismiss things, even if they may seem a bit dry and intellectual. There may actually be a larger reason, a larger purpose for why the Buddha is teaching these things. So the suttas, generally speaking, are there to help us. Remember the beautiful simile the Buddha says about picking up the leaves in the Gosinga wood. Yeah, he says that he picks up a handful of leaves from the forest in the Gosinga wood. He picks it up and then he says to the monks or to his disciples who are there, he says, what is more, the leaves in my hand or all the leaves in the canopy overhead? And of course, the monks say, well, the leaves in your hand, master, are few. There's only a few leaves in your hand, and the leaves in the canopy overhead are enormously many. And then the Buddha says, well, those teachings that I have given you are like the leaves in my hand. And all the things that I know, that I have realized, is actually like the canopy overhead. Why is it that I have only taught you the teachings like the leaves in my hand? Because those teachings are what lead to the end of suffering, to an understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Whereas all the leaves overhead, they don't lead to that. They are just philosophy. They are just knowledge or things about the world. So the Buddha is saying everything he has taught has a purpose. Everything he has taught leads you towards enlightenment, away from suffering, towards happiness. So whenever you open the suttas, the four Nikayas, read it with care, read it with a desire to understand, read it as if it is really, really important, and then you are doing it in the right way. And then it will become a force in your life and a force in your practice. Okay, so let us stop there, and we can hopefully finish off the questions tomorrow if we have some extra time. So you are very welcome to ask more questions if you like, but for now, let's stop there. So Aya, over to you.
Okay.